Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us on the premiere episode of Meet the President. They were 18, and they are now down to 8. They were aspirants, and they are now candidates, and will be officially on the ballot 69 days from now on the 8th of August. And so throughout this program, we will be giving them a chance for 1 full hour to speak to you about the issues, about what they hope to do as CEO of the country that is Kenya. Hashtag Meet the President on social media for your interactions. Our first guest on Meet the President is presidential candidate from Third Way Alliance Kenya, Dr. Ekuru Aukot. Before we start to speak to him, let's get to know him a little better. Take a look at this story.
On Sunday, May 28, 2017, Dr. Ekuru Aukot became the first presidential candidate in this year's election after he was cleared by the IEBC. Accompanied by his spouse and running mate Emmanuel Nzai, Aukot was given the nod to have his Third Way Alliance Kenya on the presidential ballot on August 8th.
Everything ready. You can see all my supporters here, my running mate, First Lady, and everybody else. Governor Wajir is here supporting us. Woman Rep Garissa. We have all our fun people have come all the way from Taita Taveta. Many guys are held up at the gate, waiting to see this day happen. So we are beginning the journey.
Aukot procedurally met all the requirements in accordance with the Elections Act, but he says his candidature is more than just that. Ever since he declared his intention to vie for president, Dr. Aukot has largely regarded his political outfit as the alternative voice for the shortcomings of the country's political establishment.
Last year alone, we borrowed about 700 billion Kenya shillings, but we also stole 700 billion. So theft of public money has been ongoing for a long time. Nobody's bothered to stop it. President Uhuru has clearly come out to say that he does not know what to do. So we want to show him how to arrest theft of public money.
We'll wave it to the crowd.
While many recall Aukot's role as an expert during the making of the current constitution, few know the roots of the son of a Turkana polygamist born in July 1972. He initially lived in a volatile stretch of pastoral land before bearing the brunt of displacement at a tender age.
That was in the 1970s, early 80s, where I also went to school. Joined nursery school from Kapedo, because I had started nursery school in Kapedo. Then when we were displaced, went to nursery school in Mogotio, then transferred, started I think standard 1 in Mogotio, and then transferred to Mombasa, Mtungwe Primary School, where my brother was now in the Kenya Navy. So I did, I started there up to standard 3 in Mombasa, Mtungwe Primary. Then came back to Mogotio, went to a primary school called Athenai Primary in Nakuru County, which is just across the river from Baringo to Nakuru County. Then went back to Kapedo for classes 5 and 6. Then came back to Baringo again. So I was truly nomadic in my education.
Aukot then headed to Kabarnet Boys High School and later the University of Nairobi to study law. His postgraduate training at the Kenya School of Law was followed by an opportunity in the Oxford Refugee Studies program.
And that gave me the opportunity to travel to a number of countries as a research assistant. I spent a lot of time in northern Uganda, a place called Ajumani, as a research assistant, again, where I interacted a lot with the Southern Sudanese refugees. And then I'll go to South Africa, a place called Lindela, that's around 1997, to see how the South African authorities were treating Zimbabwean or other Southern African nationalities.
Aukot is a family man, a father of 2 daughters. He holds a master's degree in development law and a PhD in constitutional law from Warwick University in the United Kingdom, where he also taught.
This is probably the story of my life, when every time I introduce myself and people will ask me, you're a lawyer with a PhD in law and a Turkana, ati umejaribu sana. You know, I will hear all these kind of stories all the time.
Perhaps one of his best-known accomplishments, Aukot was the CEO of the Commission of Experts tasked with delivering to Kenyans the new constitution back in 2010, before his 2017 candidacy for president.
if you compare this with the rest of the world, ours actually, I think he's praised as one of the best, one of the most progressive developmental constitutions in Africa and in the world.
Aukot remains particularly critical of the established political leadership.
Our clarion call to young people and to women in this country is be on the table of decision making. Then that way you make decisions that actually affect you, because the longevity of this country has to do with young people and the people who are majority.
He agrees that an enormous task lies ahead of the Third Way Alliance Kenya in trying to change the minds of Kenyans in the so-called NASA and Jubilee strongholds.
Tribal numbers, have they addressed our common daily life struggles? No. Talk about corruption. Has tribe ended the corruption? Tribalism, issues of rent, security. So, tribe does not feed anyone. What we believe at Third Way Alliance is that we need to create opportunities for everyone in Kenya, regardless of your tribe.
Aukot, the politician, is raring to head into the August 8th general election, believing an upset against the current political establishment is a real possibility. Mark Namaswa, KTN News.
Thanks for that, Mark Namaswa. And Dr. Ekuru Aukot joins me now on Meet the President. Thank you, sir, for making the time.
Thanks for the invitation.
Great. So let's start by talking about the Third Way Alliance. Kenya, it's supposed to be the third force. It's supposed to be unique. It's supposed to be different from the dichotomy of Kenyan politics that we know it to be today. How markedly different is the Third Way Alliance from everything we have already on the political scene?
First of all, it's absolutely made of fresh, untainted Kenyans without any baggage that can be associated with the 54 years of our leadership in this country. And speaking of the name Third Way Alliance, it has a very special meaning, taking into account the history, the political history and governance of Kenya. We derive the name Third Way Alliance from looking at our political history and the way we've been governed for the last 54 years. We reckon that the first liberation in this country was the independence liberation, which independence liberation, in our view, in our considered opinion, was actually betrayed by the very people who took over power at independence, but actually did not live up to the dreams and aspirations of people like Dedan Kimathi, the Mau freedom fighters, the Mekatilili Wamenza, and all those people who opposed a certain oppression of colonialism. So when they got into power, they actually began to undermine that very dream of the Kenya that we wanted. Fast forward to 1992, came what we believe was the second liberation in this country, the repeal of Section 2A that broadened the political democratic space in Kenya. Now, we thank those people for agitating, opposing the one multi-party democracy. But unfortunately, when they got into power, and many of them up until now still want to lead us, started repeating the same mistakes of the very, very founding, or the so-called founding fathers of the Kenya's republic. Now, since then, the problems of Kenya have been the same. Even though Kenya still remained resilient, we're talking about tribalism, talking about nepotism, talking about corruption. All these things have been practiced by the first liberators of this country, but also by the second liberators of this country. So when we met in 2014 with a group of Kenyans and looked at our status quo, and we figured out that what Kenya actually needs is a third liberation. It needs a liberation that is transformative, that is responsive government, that truly believes will restore Kenya to that Kenya that we wanted at independence, the Kenya that we wanted in 1992. So this is why we founded the name, we settled on the name Third Way Alliance Kenya. And therefore, it's an alliance of Kenyans who truly believe we must change this country. Because, again, the politics of Kenya has been so much choreographed around very limited minority personalities, either families or names or populism. And therefore, we say we want to move from that, because Kenya will never prosper if it is just predicated upon few individuals. So that's why we founded the name Third Way Alliance. And maybe on the same note, we also wanted to find a symbol of a party, a symbol that denotes that Kenyans. That's why we settled on the symbol of a camel, because that's what our symbol is. Now, a camel for us gave us four issues inform the choice of this symbol camel. Number one is the resilience of Kenyans. We looked at Kenya, despite all the problems it's gone through all these years, is still standing. And therefore, we wanted something that can actually denote that resilience. Number two, we believe that Kenya has been in the desert of bad leadership for a long, long time. And therefore, we need something that can take us leaders into the oasis of good governance. Number three, I'm sure you've heard this is the realpolitik. I kept on hearing even this week, despite 8 of us being in the race, that this thing is a 2-horse race. And therefore, we thought, well, let's respond it by giving them a different animal that actually will run the marathon of recovering Kenya, of winning Kenya. And the last one, why a symbol, is these people have been winning elections for many decades, but they have never won the country. They have never won the people of Kenya, which is why our theme, the theme of our campaign, is taking back our country from all these bad things.
Okay, all right. And we do hope it won't be a case of the animal farm. We all know how that ended up. We have horses and donkeys and camels and ostriches in this race.
Unfortunately for them, they cheapen it by just saying it's the horses. But I think if you look at the meaning we give to the symbol of our party, it actually has deep-seated meaning and deeply philosophical too.
All right, so let's start to talk about the issues, in the country, and that you would start to tackle, should you win, on the 8th of August. Talk to us about the state of our economy. How would you describe it? Where do you understand it to be at this point?
Well, to be honest with you, I think the state of the economy is very bad. Any person out there doing business, I mean, I'm a practicing lawyer. I run a legal consultancy in this country. And I can tell you for the last 2 to 3 years, business has been terrible. I mean, Kenya's economy is not buoyant anymore. It all depends on policies based on decisions that are made. It all depends on the security that we give to investment in this country. And therefore, there are no opportunities that are being created that will...
Okay, Dr. when you say the economy is very bad, do you want to sort of describe that in terms of some tangibles? When you say it's very bad, what does that mean exactly?
A lot of things. Number one, we are talking about unemployment of about 40% for the longest time. We're talking about the death of various industries. Back in the days, Kenya places like Nyanza used to be the seat of cotton production. We're talking about industries like pan paper dyeing, fishing industry in this country, agro-processing, meat production. Nothing is happening. And this is all industries that if they were actually promoted, they will create job opportunities for Kenyans. They will put money into people's pockets. Textile industry in Kenya is dead. You know, coconut and cashew nut production in this country is dead. I mean, the fact that there's no food security in this country. So these are all economic opportunities which will really be able to create job opportunities for people, and it will be able to create wealth in the people of Kenya. Raw materials is being exported out of this country. That is exporting jobs. If you look at, for example, the mega infrastructural projects that we are doing in this country, the heavy borrowing towards this mega infrastructure is actually from outside. It's not benefiting Kenyans. Today, even a pregnancy in Kenya is actually indebted to the tune of about 90,000 Kenya shillings.
So let's talk about some of those specifics, because you've mentioned the issue of public debt. So how would you have handled it differently at the point at which we are right now? The current administration says they're borrowing for some of these big infrastructure projects that will help shore up a number of those industries and that will have some long-term benefits for Kenyans. What are your thoughts? If you were given, say, Eurobond today, all the money that we're putting into SGR, which is currently being launched by the head of state, what would your use of this money be different? Because you're saying borrowing from outside as opposed to internally, but some say if the government starts to borrow internally, then that would sort of squeeze credit for the common mwananchi as well.
But first of all, let's demystify. I mean, I do not know what single project has been funded by Eurobond money. As a matter of fact, we don't even know. We've not fully accounted for Eurobond money. This government has been very elusive. So that is money that's already out there. We do not know.
Where would you have put that money?
I will have put that money. Okay, so that invites me to talk to you about some of the pillars at Third Way Alliance Kenya. the first pillar that we are actually focusing on is ending economic and social injustice in this country. And what does that mean? It means that we need to industrialize every economic opportunity that obtains in the various parts of this country. I'll give you a few examples. We've been to Mbita in Homa Bay County, and we realized that from Fangano and Rusinga Island alone, the fishing by the ordinary Kenyan pumps into the GDP of Kenya 7 billion Kenya shillings. But guess what? There is no single fish processing plant in the entire Nyanza province. And therefore, if I had Eurobond money, I would actually put it into a fish processing plant in Luo Nyanza, where fish is being done and in cost. And that way you actually encourage the common person who spends hours on the lake, in the ocean, fishing, to be able to bring the fish, and we process them. We do value addition to that fish, and that means money. Secondly, if I had money like Eurobond, I'll develop meat processing in this country, meat industry. I'll look at the ASAL regions. These are people who are millionaires in terms of the cattle and the animals that they own. But we have never industrialized meat processing and all the byproducts that come with it. So for example, I will not want to see nomadic pastoralists or people in the ASAL region looking desperate and destitute every 5 years because of drought. And this is a failure of government policy and a failure of investment in those areas and taking advantage of the economic opportunity that obtains there. Agro-processing is another. Horticulture, milk production, cashew nuts and coconut production in the coast. These are all opportunities, economic opportunities that obtain. So if I had Eurobond money, if I recovered the money from Anglo Leasing, Goldenberg, and all the money that has been stolen, I will put that.
That's a whole loaded question we can talk about a short while from now.
I have every confidence. I mean, I'm very confident that I will be able to recover this money. Why? Because first of all, I'm not a beneficiary of any corruption scandals. And that takes me to the second pillar of Third Way Alliance Kenya, which is we must end theft of public funds.
Okay, we'll get to the theft of public funds in a moment. Yeah. Let's talk about SGR. It's the talk of town at the moment. Just been launched by the president today and tomorrow throughout the week. What are your thoughts about SGR and the benefits, if any, that you see? And what would be your plan with this if you win?
First of all, SGR is not even a Jubilee government project. I mean, let's just start from there. This is a project that was started by the government of national unity. What Jubilee government has done is to use SGR as a basis for more borrowing. And after
the work of any current administration, though, to take over projects that have been started by their predecessors and to carry them forward.
You could do that.
Because SGR essentially becomes Jubilee's project. It'll become Third Way's project should you take over.
But you know what I will do? I will not use a project like SGR to put more, to burden Kenyans more in terms of borrowing. Look, if I had the opportunity to do an SGR, I'll probably modernize our current railway lines.
SGR is with us now. Mm-hmm. It's not a matter of if. We have it. The first phase is being launched. It will be operational by January next year. So we have it now. What would you do with it?
Well, I won't throw it away because already it is a heavy debt on us.
Continue with phase 2?
I think for me, I will not create a dry pot like the current SGR intends to do, say in Naivasha. The intention is this. If we want to serve, I mean, if this SGR is supposed to be economical, of economic benefit to Kenyans, then I will take it to the border, or say to the border of Kenya, say Busia and Malaba. That way I'll be tapping into Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, DRC, Congo, and South Sudan. And in fact, if I was president of Kenya today, I would definitely call South Sudan, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi, and DRC into a table.
But even some of those are already going on with the project on their own outside of Kenya.
Tell them we must co-share in the establishment of this project.
But they're going on with their own project.
Yeah, but listen, so that's the question then. Of what economic value is it to do a project which is of no value to the neighbor? Because if it's about Kenya, I will develop internal fracture. I will connect these countries. I will use the money, the huge amounts of money. By the way, compare our SGR with what Tanzania is doing, with what Morocco is doing, Djibouti, and I think even Morocco. The cost for what they are doing in terms of SGR is so low compared to that what we are doing in Kenya. Ours has been a basis for how much we can steal how much we can keep on borrowing. Today, I mean, the President Uhuru came from, I think, China the other day, and he borrowed another 3-point-something billion Kenya shillings. So if honestly SGR is supposed to be of economic value to Kenyans, do you want to keep on borrowing and take this SGR to the border towns of Busia and Malaba when you know those countries are already doing their own thing? For me, if you ask me, Yvonne, SGR is not a priority for Kenya today.
What is the priority?
Priority for Kenya today, if you're asking me, is food security.
Okay.
And water.
All right. So let's talk then about food security in the country. There's the subsidies that are currently in place for unga. Your thoughts?
Well, you see, from our manifesto and picking from our first pillar, which is the ending economic and social injustice in Kenya, we've actually focused on two key things. Number one, how do we stop wastage of water? We believe that we cannot allow a river drain into the Indian Ocean at a time when Kenyans are dying of hunger. So we believe that we are going to tap water, harvest water, do dams, do ponds, and using that water, begin to do irrigation, drip irrigation, like many countries do. It's not rocket science. This is 21st century. There's technology. Countries like Egypt, Israel are actually desert, almost desert, but there is food security there is assured. So the same thing we want to do in Kenya. And that way, with water and now food, then you're able to create job opportunities. You can imagine job opportunities from farming to processing of those farm products, to the market, to transport.
So, where do you think is the weakest link then throughout that chain of agriculture, from farming all the way, from farm to fork, if you like? Where are the specific challenges and how would you start to address those?
I think for me the challenges are these. Number one, it has to be a deliberate policy decision that we are going to make sure that Kenya is food secure.
There's that deliberate policy decision.
As you know, agriculture is devolved, and a lot of money is now being devolved into the counties. But where the weaknesses is that there is already lack of cooperation between the national government and the county government. So what Third Way Alliance is envisioning is a situation where, pursuant to Article 6 of the Kenya Constitution, we will definitely collaborate purposely with the county government to ensure that food production and agriculture thrives, so that gives Kenyans the opportunity. So
it's just about collaboration then? Is that the main challenge, do you think, with agriculture in this country?
Well, I think first of all, it's a factor of leadership too. I mean, if you have a leadership that is insensitive, that is not responsive to people's needs, because what is the basic problem of Kenyans today? For me, the way I see it is the ordinary Kenyan needs to put food on the table. And that's a big challenge right now. So you need a leadership that will say, how do we achieve that intent? And that has to do with, first, a policy directive that says, this is the strategic direction my country will take.
What is that strategic
direction? I'll give you an example. I went to Thailand a couple of years back, and I met friends there, and I asked them, how is it that you people surpassed us as a country? Because in the 1960s, we are told Kenya was at par or even better than the tiger economies of Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, and the rest. You know, one of the fellows told me, simple, we must feed our people. We must make our people healthy. With a healthy population, well-fed, then you can go into other things. So I think for me, the problem that we have in Kenya, we've had in Kenya for the longest time, we've not been deliberate in prioritizing the issues that concern the Kenyans. Okay. And for me today, we're talking about simple, basic things, food security, education.
I'd like some specifics, because you're talking about feeding the people and making sure they're healthy. But how do we do that? Why has Kenya been perennially food insecure? What about the subsidies that are in place right now? I'm trying to get an understanding if you perhaps can articulate the problem with agriculture in this country. Is it smallholder farmers? Is it the large ones? Are we productive? Are we efficient in the way that we do our agriculture? Should we be farming maize? Should we not? I'm looking for some specifics from you beyond talking about food security in general.
So let's, for example, discuss the question of land. A lot of people in this country hold huge tracts and acres of land, and they do nothing with it. And I think for me, it's a question of government policy and government directive insisting that if you are going to hold such huge tracts of land, like many people have 200,000 acres or 400,000 acres, what are they doing with that land? for me, that's partly the reason why we came up with Chapter 5 on land and environment in the country, and we say that land has to be used sustainably, and that has not been enforced. So in my thinking is that this country is very horrible. We have all the resources that we can use to be able to make Kenya food secure.
Yeah, but a lot of experts and food security experts will tell you that the issue with agriculture and farming in this country is not necessarily the big farmers, but it's the smallholder farmers, the ones who own a quarter, a half acre, an acre here, an eighth there, and are doing farming. And that some say that is where the focus should be, rather than on the big landowners, which is a problem, but that the majority of the farming in this country is not done on the big tracts of land.
Listen, it's both ways. You can begin to industrialize food production or agriculture like it happens in Europe. And in Europe, government deliberately gives incentives to farmers and ensures that those incentives plow back into the economy. If it is small farming, we can actually go technological. I mean, I was a chair of Jomo Kenyatta University Council, and there's a lot of invention that takes place in that university, including the invention of just a small tractor for the small farmer, the 1 acre, the half acre farmer. What I would have thought will happen in this country with the kind of leadership that we have today is to industrialize even that technology. Applying technology these days is not rocket science. It's doable. I mean, there are many countries in the world that are not even better off than Kenya, but they are food secure. So it's a deliberate question of policy by government. It's investment, apportioning resources to that particular aspect, because that's what will drive a country.
Okay, what are your thoughts on the subsidy that is currently in place? Unga is now 90 shillings.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that in the 21st century, we can still talk of importing maize from Mexico, when actually in Kenya we can produce that food. It's, for me, a failure of government policy. And I think we shouldn't be dehumanizing our people in this century by subsidizing maize. Even the subsidized maize is not enough, which means this maize, actually, the subsidization of this maize is actually used for political reasons. And one wonders, I mean, why wait all this time? I mean,
your thoughts on the economics of a subsidy?
The economics of subsidy? What do you mean? Explain to me what you mean by the economics of subsidy.
Is it something that's viable, sustainable? Is it in the right place? Is it targeting the right people?
You see, first of all, even if you subsidize food today, and people do not have the power of purchase, and that's why I go back to our first pillar, which is that how do we ensure that the average Kenyan has a job opportunity, has money into his pocket to be able to purchase? So even if you subsidize and people do not have money in their pocket, it dehumanizes people.
So should they not have done the subsidy then? Because what you're saying is it perhaps wouldn't make a difference anyway. People can't afford the 90, they can't afford the 150, the 180. I'm just asking the specifics of the decision to subsidize the price of maize at this moment by the current administration.
Listen, I guess we have an emergency, and in an emergency you have to make certain decisions, and that therefore includes the subsidization of the current price. But why did we get there in the first place? That is the question. We didn't have to get to this stage where we have to subsidize maize, and it's not even sustainable anyway. Over and above that, as I say, you can subsidize for all it takes. But how many people can afford it? Even with the subsidized maize today, you know very well it's not even enough. It's not out there. So the question for me is, how do we avoid that situation going forward?
How would you have handled this situation right now? There was a shortage of maize flour, the prices were up. If you were president 3-4 weeks ago, at the time when maize prices were at an all-time high, what would you have done? Because you're criticizing the subsidy, that's fine.
Yes.
But what measures would you have taken to cushion the Kenyan from these high food prices and indeed the high cost of living?
Okay, I mean, a couple of measures. Okay, I don't really believe in the so-called storage of maize and in silos and stuff. I believe in giving people opportunity to be able to have an income that will ensure that even if drought comes today, they are able to afford. But faced with an emergency, such as the one that we have, and we saw people dying of hunger, of course, any reasonable administration will ensure that there is food on the table for people. But that is a failure of policy, a failure of planning, the absence of a plan to alleviate that kind of suffering. So actually, this for me is a failure of a government, because when you promise that people that you're going to ensure their food secure,
what would you have done, though, is the specific I'm looking for. That very specific decision that you would have made if you were seated in that seat at that moment.
Well, listen, maybe I don't know whether you're not listening to me. I'm saying, faced with an emergency situation such as the one that we have, there's a drought in the country. Of course, I'll make sure that people of Kenya find food, even if it means importing from wherever. But I'm saying to you, if I was in charge of this country, I would not have allowed that to happen in the first place. Because, as I said, we have got everything in this country to ensure that we are food secure. It's a failure of leadership, it's a failure of bad policy.
Everything in this country to make sure we're food secure?
Yes, we do.
Kenya is not producing enough food to feed her citizens.
And why are we not producing?
Tell me.
We are not producing because you have got a lackluster leadership that does not really care about the needs of the people. We are not producing because you have a failure of government policy for all this time. We have a lot of rivers in this country. Land is arable. Who would have thought, for example, that in Turkana land, where I come from, today we'll discover oil, that there is a lake beneath? Why is it so difficult to just sink boreholes, do drip irrigation, and actually ensure that people are food secure? The Galana Kulalu irrigation scheme. You tell me, how did that fail? And yet, we had all this massive investment into it.
Would you reinvest into Galana Kulalu? Is that something you would carry on with?
Oh, yeah.
What do you think were the problems with it?
I will do it.
It was a great and noble attempt, no?
Yeah, but it's not, money was stolen. Money was stolen.
Is that the reason for the failure of Galana Kulalu, that money was stolen?
Of course, the money was not invested into the project. How can drip irrigation fail anywhere in the world today? Because these mega infrastructural projects are formulated with the sole purpose of diverting resources.
So the failure of Galana Kulalu was due to money being
It's corruption.
Okay, all right. We need to take a break. We will be right back. We've got lots more to talk about. There's corruption and a host of other issues that we want to discuss with you here, Dr. Ekuru Aukot, on Meet the President. We're taking a break. When we come back, we have Dr. Ekuru Aukot, of course, with so much more we have to talk about. But we will also be giving you some interesting facts about the presidency in Kenya. You don't want to miss that. Stay with us. The hashtag is Meet the President. We will be right back.
This is KTN News.